Welcome back to another episode of The Conscious Artist, a safe space for conversations around mental health awareness for musicians, artists, and all human beings. I am your host, Pallavi Mahidara. I'm a concert pianist and teacher, and I am absolutely thrilled that you are joining us today. My hope for this show is that it will give all of us a sense of solidarity and knowledge that we are not alone, and together, through these conversations, we can create more awareness and change for a healthier future. My guest today is an energy healer and intuitive, following her soul's purpose to teach humans how to reconnect with their bodies, senses, and generational joy. A psychology major, she has written an award-nominated paper titled Sexuality of an Aging Woman, where she debunked societal stereotypes and physical misconceptions, and she is currently authoring a book focused on joy and sensuality. Please join me in welcoming Liz VanZandt to The Conscious Artist. Liz, I'm so happy to have you here with us today.
Hi, I've never been introduced like this before. I feel so incredible.
Well, I'm really excited to chat with you today because I think we're going to learn a lot. Today's topic is broadly about healing through joy. And as we will learn from you, there are many different types of joy. There's intentional joy, generational joy, the language of your senses. And to counter that, there's also many types of trauma, which we'll get into. But to start us off, could you explain more in detail these different types of joy?
Yeah, so I think you have to start with generational joy. I think generational anything is sort of the foundation that we're built on. So to me, how I've defined it is that we're a living map of the sensations, beauty, knowledge, and joy that's been passed down to us from our ancestors. And it lives in our body, it is alive, and we always have access to it. Intentional joy is taking in those practices, taking in those personal definitions of what joy feels like in your body and creating structure in your day to create an experience that is centered around joy, at least as a balancing act to everything else that's going on in the world. And I don't think that you can talk about joy unless you talk about your senses, because our senses are always helping us define the world around us. They're allowing us to light up to say, oh, what is making me feel this way? What is bringing me joy? And so they are kind of the thread between our internal and external experiences of joy.
Wow, I really love this definition and I love how you explained it. And I would really love to get more into detail about each of these. And I suppose that their counterparts and the way that we feel trauma in our bodies, like how it physically affects us, how it can sit in our bodies and show up, manifest as either physical injuries or physical ailments. So maybe we can talk more about that as well. To start off, could you talk a little bit more about generational joy and sort of how we can learn to access that generational joy, how we can learn to access all of those different parts of us that have been passed on through our parents and our grandparents and our great grandparents, etc.
Yeah, so I don't think you can further define generational joy unless you also accept that generational trauma exists. But I think the biggest thing to note is that we wouldn't be here today, we wouldn't be alive if our ancestors only experienced trauma. And to get through those hard times, there were collective practices, there were plants that were used, there were individual practices to create an experience of joy. The way that I see it when I said that we are a living map, right, is that these practices, we've inherited them, we have access to them. I think that everybody has an experience in their life where they've sort of been struck by something and it just made them feel grounded, whole, like they weren't alone. And I think that those are experiences of generational joy, right? They're reaffirming that we're not alone in our body. We have these clues that our ancestors have left for us. And it's up to us, as much as we dig into trauma to heal, we have to dig in to the practices that strengthen these connections, because we're not only actively connecting to our ancestors in that way, but we're also strengthening these practices and this communication for future generations. Does that make sense?
It does, but it also makes me realize that, a lot of these practices, as you are saying, were common generations ago. And in today's world, I think many of us are not ever given the tools or have any sort of exposure to these practices or to anything that was related to the past. And so, I don't know, I guess in today's fast paced, technologically based world, there's a lot that we need to learn how to sort of like slow down and access things that we don't even realize exist within us, right?
Yeah, and I think it's more remembering. I think that your body informs you when something has triggered that, right? Like our body holds memories that our minds could never fathom. And it's really just taking the time to listen. It's taking the time to say, "Ooh, I got pulled here. Ooh, this makes me feel like energy is coming out of my chest," whatever. It's really remembering to listen to your body because you don't have to be taught, right? You just have to, I guess, really believe and dive into it. And the world is really loud. It's chaotic, it's changing all of the time. But when you can do practices like this, what you're really doing is you're teaching yourself to retreat into the world as opposed to feeling like you have to isolate from it.
Okay. Maybe could we talk a little bit more about sort of how to allow yourself to feel? And I know it sounds like it might be very basic, but until a couple years ago when I started therapy, I was completely unaware that I did not feel my feelings fully, that I was suppressing my feelings, that I was suppressing my emotions, that I was constantly ignoring what I felt in my body. I was not probably even aware that I was feeling things in my body, if you can understand what I mean. So it's only through
Hmm.
therapy, through having someone that was frequently reminding me to drop into my body, to notice the tension that I was feeling in certain parts of my body. Every time my therapist would ask me, "How are you feeling?" And I would say, "Well, I think," she would say, "No, that's thinking. How are you feeling?"
Yeah, I like to approach this two ways. I think the first is we need to get rid of the definition that joy is an activity. Joy is a sensation and it is a moment. The other part is simplicity speaks louder than any sort of vocabulary or words that you could use. So if we approach, "I feel numb," right? I haven't felt joy in a very long time, which I've had a lot of through doing this work, I've had a lot of people tell me that. And I don't think it's that you haven't experienced joy. I think that we forget that joy is a very simple, fleeting sensation. And asking your body what it wants is the first step to being able to mimic practices that you could even access joy. So, what you're saying is, "I think I feel like this," and your therapist saying, "No, but how do you feel?" It's the same concept, right? We'll start at like the most basic thing, eating. Okay. What do I actually want to eat? Going through a Rolodex of sensations in your body, crunchy, warm, wet, whatever, that's starting to break down your senses in a way that they can answer your questions so your brain doesn't have to do anything. And I think it's really always coming back into body. So, however you start your day, before you open your eyes, how do you want to feel that day? What do you want to nourish yourself with? How is your body feeling in that moment? And then once you can start to speak that language, then we can go to joy. So, not what brings me joy, but how does joy feel in my body? What are these sensations? Does it come from my chest? Does it come from my belly? Is it hot? And then throughout your day, anything that engages that reaction, we can just take a note. And then over time, we'll have a catalog of experiences, a trend of experiences that have been able to give us that sensation.
I love this. What a wonderful way to express just simply how to access that. Like I love the way you said, "Do you want crunchy? Do you want soft? Do you
Yeah.
want, but it's like it's so silly because, sometimes we'll be like, "I'm so hungry, but I don't know what I feel like eating. I could eat this, I could eat that." And to really just start to break it down to the most basic questions, that seems like such a practical way to start approaching something that could feel monumental for some people.
And joy can be overwhelming, right? If you feel like you're not experiencing joy, if I were to ask you, what have you done that gave you the sensation of joy? Your brain can't go there because it's too
Right.
hard. It's too big of a question. What does that even mean? And that's why I'm saying, like, it is a very personal and complex definition, but the essence of what it feels like, we all have an experience. We know exactly what that was. I may not have words for it, but my body can get back to that sensational memory. And so that's what you're strengthening. You're strengthening that connection with that memory in your body so that you can access it more easily.
That's beautiful. And do you think that as a society, we have had a habit of conflating external happiness with internal joy? Like, do you think society knows the difference?
100%. And I think that we see joy as luxury. I think that we see joy as something that we have to be able to pay for. We have to have this really big break in our schedules. And I think that keeps a lot of people from creating spaces for joy and being disconnected not only from themselves, but their communities. Because when you have a life where you get to experience it often, there is no way that you do not want to help your communities, your friends, your families also experience that sensation. And so if we take away the external pressure of joy, we're making different decisions. We're having different conversations. We're creating agency in every situation, which is one of the most powerful things that you can ever have as an individual is authentic agency.
That's essentially what you're saying. That's intentional joy.
Exactly. Exactly.
Incredible. And I remember reading, I don't remember if it was on your website or on one of your social media posts, but you said that joy is a muscle. Could you go a little bit more in detail about that?
Yeah, so going back to what I was saying about becoming clear on the sensation of joy and being able to recognize it, joy is a muscle in that way. Until we start to practice identifying and understanding when that sensation in our body is triggered, it's going to be harder. But when we can dedicate time in our lives to feeling this emotion, we can get back to it a lot quicker. Even when there's chaos around us, we can go back to either an experience or we know what practice or plants or whatever to grab to give us that sensation. And so it's really strengthening the trust in your body's definition, but also getting your brain sort of on track to be able to go back there. We're strengthening the neural pathways between our cognitive realities and the sensations that we experience every day.
Right. It's a practice. It's a daily practice like anything else that we want to make in a way a habit, right?
And it's the recognition of what that is. So now we don't have to worry about, am I feeling it? Because we've strengthened the muscle, right? We know that's what it is. Next
Mm.
thing. Now all we have to do is write down what that was.
And you just mentioned about plants. If you're not feeling so joyful, like what can you do to help yourself? Could you go more in detail about that?
First of all, I'm always talking about plants, so I'll always bring them up. But I can go to my own experience. There are a couple of tools that I use. Sometimes it's when I'm having a hard time accessing my own joy, but sometimes it's when I want to feel really connected because generational joy is actively participating and connecting to the generations we come from. So
Mm.
for me, there are a couple of plants that really help boost my feeling of connectedness. One of those is rosemary. As soon as I
Mhm.
smell it, I just feel like all of the weight of my body disappears and I feel really rooted and grounded. And my family is Scandinavian, and rosemary has been used for generations. It's a really powerful herb. It's for protection, it's for your purpose, things like that. And so when I'm feeling a little lost or overwhelmed, I always reach for rosemary because no matter what, I have that reaction.
Wow.
That's knowledge.
Kind of like the way every time I feel stressed or before sleeping, if I need to relax, like I'll smell some lavender essential oil and it immediately calms me down.
Exactly. And these are the clues that we have. These are the practices our ancestors gave us, right? We're not alone. We're not starting from zero. We're starting from generations of tools that have worked for individuals. And all we're doing is remembering what those are.
Wow. Okay. What about, for example, other types of things that we put in our body, essentially like nutrition, foods, drinks? Like, how do those affect our sensations in our body, our physical and mental health? I mean, we know that there is science to back up how much good nutrition and good food can help to keep us in a better mental state, right?
Do I get to give a little neuropsych lesson very fast?
Oh, please, with
Is this
great
my
pleasure.
dream? Okay, so one of the plants that I use when I'm going through a very, very tough time, right? I used it recently. I was going through grief and I have a lot of complex grief. So it always is big when it comes. So there is a plant called mucuna. Basically, mucuna contains L-DOPA, which is a precursor to dopamine. So when you take it, you're allowing your body to release dopamine more freely, and you're sort of igniting your pleasure center. So what makes you feel good? So that's a really good tool where we can merge what we know about neuroscience, how the brain works, and then we can mix it with plants. I love mucuna. I personally don't take it every day. I take it when I need it, but I think it's a very, very powerful tool.
Okay.
That's how nutrition and your senses and every aspect of your life can work together. The less stuff that you have to dig through, then the easier it's going to be to access a huge range of emotions.
Are there specific foods, for example, whether they're fruits or vegetables or grains or things like that, that can help give kind of like a mood booster in some way?
Yeah, I mean, there are so many. And I think we can go down a nutrition hole as people and get really lost in it, but it's always listening to your body, right? Like, how do you feel in the winter when you eat a grapefruit? For me, I feel like, okay, sun is coming, I'm gonna be okay. Do I know what happens in the background in my brain? No, but I know that it gets me through. And so I think it's also recognizing, what do you reach for? How does it make you feel? And then starting there and then starting to look at the science behind it, right? Trust your body and then look it up so that we're not looking it up and then ignoring our bodies.
Essentially, listening to your intuition.
Yeah, listen to your intuition. And then if you want to go into a deep dive, start there as opposed to going into this entire huge, overwhelming world.
That's definitely been a big lesson and big challenge for me over the last couple of years because, I'm the queen of research and I love to go down the internet rabbit hole. I mean, I don't love it. I hate it, but I go down the internet rabbit hole and then I don't know what to try. I don't know what to do. And I've definitely become better in these last couple of years at just like trusting myself and trusting my body and listening to my cravings and understanding if, like even if it's that time of month, for example, and I start to feel like I'm really craving carbs way more than I normally do, to allow myself that little bit of craving, that's okay. I mean, to be kind with my body, to just essentially listen. I mean, it's not an easy thing if you've never learned it.
I mean, I'm always craving chips, and I can't find the science to back up that that's really good for me, but but you know what? I'm just going to keep eating chips because it makes me feel good, and sometimes we don't need the science.
You know what? Life is short. Life is too short to not do what makes us happy, honestly.
Exactly. But as far as actual things that you can do, I think that we also need to start talking about activities. Not only plants, right? We come from communities of people that had very specific practices when things would happen, whether that would be a celebration, whether it would be collective grief. And I think that there is a connection in all of us to whatever activity and practice makes sense for you. For me, drumming is a really, really powerful tool. This is an example of when I feel elated or when I feel like I am alone, I'll drum and I'll put on Nordic drumming music, and I'm not very good. I mean, I used to live next door to a rock star, and I think that he was probably very irritated by me because you could not tell me that I wasn't killing it. I was like, boom, 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 and I was like, oh, she's going. But when I want to feel really plugged into my ancestors in an active way or celebrate with them, I always reach for drumming. That is a practice that throughout human history has been so important. But that doesn't mean it's the same for everyone. Some people, it could be dancing. Some people, it could literally be walking through a meadow and feeling the wind on your skin, right? And I think it's about finding those practices that, again, trigger that sensation in your body that either plugs you in and makes you feel grounded and connected and a part of things that have existed forever, or it's something that gives you this sensation of just being alive, being in gratitude, living in this one moment, because we are only ever in a moment. And those activities can help you either celebrate or spark those feelings. And it's really personal and it's really about what your ancestors did and how can you reconnect with that.
And what would you say for people, for example, that have lived like multiple cultures growing up or have felt conflicted with their identities growing up? I've constantly felt growing up like this kind of like oscillation between the two.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are other, colleagues I've actually had on my podcast, for example, who, maybe one parent is from one country, another parent is from another country, and it's two different cultures, and they grow up in a third country, and then they move different places. And so, how would you advise how we can access that?
I actually think it's really a lot more fun that way, because we're never growing up on our own. We have the internet, right? Like we can find anything that we want. We're never
Hmm.
isolated or alone. And our ancestors, whether you're adopted, right, and you don't know who they are, we're always a mix of this collective. And so it's not about what specifically did my grandparents, my great grandparents, whatever do. It's more like, let's start to think about regions. A lot of different practices happen within a region, they're all held in this container. And so just have fun with it. Start to research. You love research. Start to say, how did people, will say like Ireland only because I have no connection there. Like, how did people in Ireland celebrate? Does that make me feel like I want to do it? Let me try it. Do I feel
Mm.
weird or am I like, ooh, I'm like nailing it? Start there, right? Like, we're never in a vacuum. We are always collaborating with the environments, the people around us. So it doesn't have to be the straight line of what you can trace back to. It's really, what is the human connection and practice that feels really good to me that I can use as a tool? And that can always change, right? You're going to find things that stand out more, but it's this really fun experience of exploration. It's just being curious.
I love that. Thank you for clarifying that and also reminding us that it's a human experience. And as probably now more than ever, all human beings essentially are the same. I mean, we are,
Hmm.
and just because we come from different countries and different colors and different backgrounds and different religions and different races, we are one species.
And what connects us more than raw curiosity, right? Curiosity doesn't have bias. Curiosity doesn't have an ego or something they want to get out of it. Curiosity is saying, I'm a human, you're a human. Wow. And that's it.
I love that so much. And I have a question. Would you say that some, like what you were talking about earlier, about maybe for you it's drumming, maybe for somebody else it could be dancing, it could be something else. Are those practices, would you say that's similar to like somatic healing, like healing through movement?
Yeah, and I think that, in the beginning, we talked about the language of your senses. And I think that our senses are always building collaborative environments. Somatic healing is taking this connection with sensations, ourself, using movement to work through something. And so you can mix them, right? Maybe you're dancing and you start to cry and you allow that to come out. What if you then mixed it with really calm lighting? Right? What if you mixed it with a scent that felt really grounding? Because we're always collaborating with our environments, and I think somatic healing is incredibly powerful. What if we added on to that with this knowledge that we also have access to?
I love that.
And think about shaking. All animals shake when something's happened. In somatic healing, there's a lot of like shaking and stomping and things like that, right? So let's use more senses. If we know that we need to get rid of this excess energy, our nervous system has been triggered in a way that maybe in this life doesn't make sense to us, and we need to shake, then let's put on something that could also be really powerful. For me, again, that would be drumming, and I would just shake and move around. And so it's allowing all of these things to almost be a heartbeat so that you're moving things out of you in a really intentional way and you're no longer a passenger.
This is so powerful. Thank you so much for sharing this. I wanted to just touch briefly because there's too much trauma in the world already. I do think it's necessary and important to talk about generational trauma and how that's passed down and how we can learn to heal that. A lot of our generation is kind of realizing that there are a lot of things that we want to put a stop to and not let that get passed down.
Yeah, and I think generational trauma, acknowledging it, one, being an active participant in healing that, two, is incredibly important. I think what I speak about is that I'm not saying this doesn't exist. I'm saying it's incredibly important, right? But if we only focus on the trauma, we're sort of reinforcing it. It's we're saying that our brain has to go there first. And I think that when you start to heal trauma, you start to have access to other things, but you still need to work on both sides. As much as you heal trauma, set time aside to engage with generational joy, right? One is not necessarily more important than the other. They have to work together because that creates balance. We can't always live in joy and we can't always live in trauma, but when we can hold hands with the both of them, we have tools on both sides. I can now really explore this pain. I think our nervous systems are always communicating the stuff that we need to heal. I know that it's not going to be too scary or too deep for me now because I can also go over here, take a break from it, and explore the generational joy that exists. So it's about finding this balance between the two. Also, if we're always healing, then we're never actually in the moment. And I think it's like being really clear and setting aside intentional phases in our life or intentional timing in our lives to explore both. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's how I think about it, because if I'm only thinking about the ways that I'm triggered or what I need to heal, it numbs the side of me that can be grateful and present in a moment. And that could just be my experience. If we think about like how cognitive behavioral therapy works, is we're trying to get on both sides of the line, right? We're trying to activate more than one part of our brain so that we can relearn and be more balanced when it happens and we can approach it in a different way.
You actually very much answered my question and gave me a very important reminder that everything in life is a balance. It's so interesting listening to you speak about the importance of balance and the constant of this balance in life, that you're right, life is not only trauma or only joy. It's funny now that I think back, of course, I had a big life change. I had to go through my trauma and my healing.
Mm-hmm.
But I did spend a lot of time thinking about my triggers and doing that inner homework. But I think to the point where I was so focused on the trauma without wanting to call it that word. But I was so focused on that side that I was kind of cocooning. And the last couple of years were a little bit, they were heavy. Like, it's okay. They were heavy. I was going through a lot. But it's also interesting that instinctively, now this year, I have felt such a desire to feel joy.
Yeah.
To just enjoy my life. And I feel joyful. I feel grateful. I feel content. I feel grounded. I feel rooted. I feel, at peace with where I am now. And I feel sort of, I don't want to say a resistance, but I kind of feel like it's not necessary for me to be worrying about healing something right now, in the sense that like I've done a lot of homework. It's okay to take a break and I can come back to it when I need to.
Exactly. And I think that when you're playing music, you're able to access a lot more, I'm going to say, texture or creating notes that are more robust, because I think music, it's like the senses, right? Like we don't have words for how music makes us feel. We just know that it makes us feel something. And when you're coming from a life experience where you're able to not only acknowledge, but experience a very broad range of emotions, there's no way that that won't be translated in your music because you hear them differently now. You're engaged in it differently. Your mind is quiet. And I think it's probably had a really incredible impact on, I'm just saying, for you, because I know that you're super talented and I make everybody listen to your music, but I think it's
You're so
probably had
sweet.
a really like visceral, I guess, like outcome for how you're performing now, how you're playing more.
I hope so. Certainly the way I feel at the piano and with music is very different. And there's a groundedness to the way I feel. There's a very clear connection that I feel physically in my body with certain composers, like Brahms, for example.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's something as silly as the fact that I'm an earth sign and Brahms was an earth sign, but like his music to me is so grounded, is so earthy, it's so rooted. I feel the weight of it in a good way. Like it keeps me steady.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like Schumann, for example, I feel very chaotic when I play Schumann's music, and I only understand that now. And this is not something that was there my whole life. For most of my, I would say until about my mid-20s, I did not understand anything about Brahms's music. It always felt so existential for me. And I think part of that was that I had just not experienced some real things that I needed to in order to be able to heal and access that part of me.
Yeah, I think it makes total sense because, again, music is undefinable, right? We can say, oh, we know what a note is, but we don't know what a note is. We're having a physical reaction to it. You're having a physical reaction to it when you play. And so it's, again, your environment collaborating with you.
I love that so much. I had one last question. I remember reading this on your website or again in your social media. You said living in joy is not toxic positivity. And I just wondered if you could get a little bit more in detail about that.
And I think it's a really important definition, especially now with everything that's happening in the world. It goes back to what I was saying about healing generational trauma and experiencing generational joy. To me, toxic positivity is saying there are hard things happening. I don't want to face them. I'm going to pretend like they're not. So I'm essentially looking the other way. And I think that living in joy is intentional. I think it is difficult. It takes practice, and it also takes the ability to really feel. And when you are experiencing, maybe you're a target of toxic positivity or you're doing that to yourself, you're not feeling because you're not allowing yourself to feel. And to me, that is the big difference. Joy is a sensation. And when you are saying these things are hard and I don't want to face them, you're not actually experiencing anything.
Okay. Like, for example, right now, with all the wars that are going on, it's extremely hard to read the news. Like, it's come to the point where my heart is breaking every 5 seconds. I feel like I'm absorbing too much of the pain to the point where I can't function. Like, I'm just living in a constant state of anxiety. And so at some point, I feel like I intentionally choose to not read the news for some hours or for a day or something because otherwise I'm not able to function.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that is trying to sort of ignore and suppress, or is that me intentionally choosing to access another part of myself in that moment?
I think that the fact that you're having a human reaction to unspeakably difficult things means that you're not ignoring it.
Okay.
I think that so recently I saw a photo of a couple who were hiding and they took a photo of themselves kissing. I don't know if you saw it. And it made me really cry. But it made me cry not because of the pain, which is very present, but it made me realize that in that moment, they were doing the most rebellious thing that you could do, saying, this moment exists. I am with you. I love you. And I'm going to express that. And I think that if you aren't being moved, then yes, that's some deep work that you need to do. But choosing to say, I can go to this place for a little bit of time, but in order to have a healthy experience of my moment to moment daily life, I need to create some space. That's not the same. I think it's choosing to experience the emotions when you have the chance, when you have the space. That's really important, but you don't have to always be looking at it. You don't have to say, I'm not feeling terrible, so that means I don't care. Sometimes the most rebellious and impactful thing that you can do is to choose, like that couple, to say, this moment, I'm going to focus here because that's the only thing to me that is valuable. And you can take that into your life in different ways so that when you're ready to look at the news, when you're ready to have hard conversations, you're not exhausted, you're not depleted, you can really be present.
That's so powerful. Wow. Thank you for sharing that and reminding us of that. And I was speaking with my therapist recently and telling her that sometimes I feel guilty for the fact that, I have a comfortable home I can come home to. I live in a Western country that's not at war at the moment, God forbid. And she was reminding me that feeling guilty does nothing. That feeling guilty is just me essentially draining myself and bringing that negative energy in a way. And rather, what I can do, which costs me nothing, is to allow myself to be grateful, feel gratitude for the things that I do have, and share that light and that love and that joy outwards and hope that it can reach others, because that costs me nothing.
Exactly, and that's the most powerful tool, right? I mean, how many times have you been in a bad mood and you meet someone and they completely change your day? That's how contagious and how powerful saying that you're not going to take away my human. That's one of the most, I think, collectively powerful things that you can do. And it makes you realize that you have to be in the present moment, right? Like it makes you realize that being grateful is very, very powerful, and everything that you do has a ripple effect. You could go into that same room and feel guilty, and you're not going to have the same impact with the people around you.
Wow, incredible. You're absolutely right. Thank you, Liz. Thank you so much for being here with us today. This was such a beautiful conversation, and I truly thank you for sharing both your knowledge, but also your healing and your joy with us, because I certainly feel it from here. So thank you. Thank you for being here with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on and letting me tell everybody I know who Brahms is. By the way, he's one of my favorite composers. That should be noted.
I love it. Thank you all so much for listening. I am truly grateful for the support from each and every one of you. If you would like to submit any questions or topics for us to address on the show, you can send us a message on our Instagram page @ConsciousArtistPodcast. Help us to spread more awareness by sharing this episode with your friends, your colleagues, your teachers, and your students. And don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Sending you all so much love and strength to tackle this week, and we'll see you next Monday for another episode of The Conscious Artist.